Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the oddly fragrant, occasionally absurd, and always fascinating world of medieval dating advice. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a bustling village fair, goats bleating, old shoes thudding against cobblestones, and a pot of something unidentifiable bubbling nearby. Everyone's dressed in wool and linen, and someone just winked at you while holding a chicken. Yes, welcome to the world of courtship, when hygiene was optional and flirting might involve a leak. Tonight, we're going to explore the strange, sweet, and seriously questionable ways people tried to win hearts in the Middle Ages. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes there without either blushing or bolting. Before we begin tonight's journey through history, I have a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this peaceful corner of the past, please consider giving the video a like or subscribing to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming nighttime adventures. It truly helps this little channel grow, and it means so much to me. If you're still awake enough to type a few words, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I find it so heartwarming to see history gently unfolding across time zones, quietly shared together. I sincerely hope this historical story is gentle enough to ease you into sleep, but there's always a small risk. It might be too interesting. And if you do happen to stay awake through the whole thing, at least you'll walk away with a bit of new knowledge, and if that's what keeps you up tonight, well, I'd say that's worth it. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself meandering through a medieval village market, baskets of herbs, rows of dented pewter mugs, and clusters of overly curious chickens pecking at your boots. The scent in the air is layered, a mixture of roasted onions, fresh manure, and something that might be perfume if you squint your nose hard enough. A nearby vendor grins at you and hands you an apple. Not just any apple, this one's been soaked in rose water and rubbed with cloves. For love, he winks. Give it to someone you fancy, and they'll dream of you tonight. You thank him politely and pretend not to notice the sticky residue it leaves on your fingers. Welcome to medieval flirtation, part superstition, part showmanship, and entirely unlike any dating advice you'd find in a magazine today. Back then, scent wasn't just about personal hygiene. It was a declaration, a status symbol, a strategy, and occasionally a trap. You wander past a group of young women grinding herbs into pastes and powders. Lavender and rosemary, sure, but also dried moss, ashes from burnt paper, and occasionally crushed snail shells. These were love tokens. You learn, it wasn't uncommon for lovers to gift each other satchels of perfumed objects. Little bundles of meaning, cloves for affection, saffron for devotion, and fennel if someone needed a little extra energy. One girl giggles as she drops a bit of garlic into a linen pouch. Garlic. A romantic gesture? Absolutely. Especially if it was mixed with wine and rubbed behind the ears. According to several medieval physicians, garlic promoted blood flow and aroused warmth. That was medieval code for makes you more lovable. As you drift farther into the market, you notice couples interacting in ways that seem oddly coded. A man adjusts his cloak, revealing a strip of embroidered linen pinned beneath it. The woman beside him blushes and turns away. Someone whispers, he's wearing her favor. You're told that wearing a piece of your beloved's clothing, or a token, like a ribbon, a veil scrap, even a shoe, was a powerful romantic gesture. Knights tied them to their swords or helmets before tournaments, sometimes risking death just to carry a lady's sleeve into battle. A few stalls down, a woman with slightly too many rings on her fingers is selling love apples. She insists they're enchanted. Cut one in half. Rub the juice on your cheeks. and your crush will be powerless to resist. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Worked for my second husband. Didn't work for the third. You thank her anyway and walk on. As you pass a wooden bench, you spot a pair of young men debating something in hushed voices. One of them is holding a linen pouch tightly in his fist. He opens it slightly, and the smell hits you. Vinegar, honey, and crushed rosemary. You learn it's a sachet meant to be tucked into a lover's pillow. So she dreams of me, he says confidently, puffing his chest. Whether it worked or not, you can't say, but you nod politely. Love, it seems, was a bit of a gamble. And still, underneath all the bizarre rituals, all the herbs and half-believed charms, was something surprisingly familiar. The same nervous energy, the same longing glances, the same hope that someone would look back and smile. A girl with a ribbon braid drops a flower into your satchel. It's a cornflower, blue and delicate, with petals already curling at the edges. For friendship, she says, or more, if the wind's right. You smile, and maybe, just maybe, you believe in that little petal's magic. Some historians still argue whether these gestures were sincere or simply fashionable performance, the medieval version of a curated profile. But as you stroll back toward the edge of the market, past a young couple sharing a lumpy piece of bread and giggling beneath a patched cloak, you think, maybe the truth doesn't matter. Maybe the belief itself was enough. And maybe garlic wasn't such a bad idea after all. You pause for a moment, turning your head as a sudden rustle draws your attention. Near the edge of the marketplace, tucked beside a thatched fence, two lovers crouch beneath a swaying sheet of linen hung out to dry. The boy is whispering something urgently, holding a small piece of parchment in trembling hands. You inch a little closer, not to eavesdrop, of course, but curiosity has a way of tugging you gently. The parchment isn't ordinary. Its edges are frayed, the ink blotchy and uneven, and the words strange. He's written not in Latin or French, but in red, not ink, blood. Carefully drawn letters loop across the page, spelling out a poem that rhymes. Poorly. But there's something undeniably sincere about it, something that makes the girl sigh and smile, then trace a fingertip over the lines. Writing love letters in blood might seem melodramatic now, but in the medieval imagination, it was the height of devotion. You didn't just say, "I love you." You proved it, quite literally, with your own veins. Some young romantics prick their fingers. Others, like this lad, use sharpened goose quills to draw just enough to write. The result was a gesture that said, "I suffer for you, and I want you to see it." It wasn't always welcomed, of course. One abbot reportedly fainted after opening a letter sent to his niece, which included not just poetry, but a lock of hair and a dried worm for symbolic depth. Historians still argue whether that story is real or merely a monkish exaggeration. But even the debate adds to the charm. You wander past the couple and continue along a narrow path, where stone walls cast long shadows and the scent of crushed time follows your footsteps. A pair of women are bent over a shallow basin, mashing something sticky between two stones. You peer closer. It's garlic again, but this time mixed with wine and fig paste. The elder of the two looks up and offers you a taste. You hesitate. She nods. "It opens the heart," she says, tapping her chest. The paste is thick and earthy, sharp at the back of your tongue, not exactly delicious, but strangely warming. The younger woman giggles and adds, "It also keeps the bad ones away." That's the thing with medieval romance. Love was as much about protection as passion. People didn't just hope to fall in love. They feared what might happen if they fell for the wrong person. Charms and concoctions weren't just for attraction. They were for defense. You had to ward off bad luck, jealousy, curses, and sometimes family expectations. A rooster crows somewhere behind you, unnecessarily loud for the hour. You take it as a cue to step away and find yourself wandering into the edge of a small orchard. Beneath a tree, a man and a woman sit side by side. He's chewing a sprig of parsley with the intensity of a man about to confess his soul. She watches him, amused. "You're going to say it?" she asks, raising an eyebrow. He gulps and begins reciting something he's clearly rehearsed. It's a list, not of her qualities, but of the stars above, and how they favor his pursuit. He names constellations. He mentions Venus. He references the moon's alignment with his fate line, whatever that is. She tries not to laugh. Astrology wasn't just for scholars. It played an enormous role in romance. Entire books were written on the right time of year to propose, the best day to kiss, or the worst day to meet someone new. Mars too close to Saturn? Don't even look at your crush. Moon in Scorpio? Definitely avoid eye contact. Some people even hired professional star readers before weddings to ensure cosmic compatibility. If the chart didn't align, engagements were broken off. You marvel at how much pressure was placed on the skies, and how sincerely people trusted the stars with their hearts. Nearby, a cluster of musicians begins tuning their lutes and fiddles. You're drawn toward them, and soon find yourself at the edge of a courtyard where banners ripple gently in the breeze. A man in polished leather armor stands in the center, holding a long pole wrapped with a silken ribbon. His hand rests against his chest, and pinned to his armor is a neatly embroidered piece of cloth. You recognize it immediately, a lady's sleeve. It's not just a decoration, it's a symbol. The fabric means he fights for her, not in war, perhaps, but in the tournament of affection. This isn't just a random performance, it's a ritual of chivalric courtship. The knight will perform a display of strength or skill, and she will decide whether to grant him favor or not. Sometimes these rituals were public, even theatrical. Others were intensely personal. You overhear someone behind you whisper, "He caught it after she dropped it from the balcony." Another voice replies, "No, she threw it right at his face." Either way, it stuck. Back in the market, a woman is gently braiding a crown of dried flowers. She weaves in sprigs of mint, a few threads of golden ribbon, and, curiously, a small chicken feather. She hums as she works. You ask her what it's for. "A wedding," she says simply, "to ward off silence." You raise an eyebrow. "Too many marriages start with dancing and end with nothing left to say." She explains. "So we braid stories into the headpieces. This one has laughter and mischief, and a tiny bit of trouble." She smiles warmly, and just like that, you realize courtship wasn't just about getting to the wedding. It was about building a story that could last beyond the feast, beyond the ceremony. Something weird, maybe, something human, something remembered. You let out a long breath, the kind that happens when your shoulders finally drop. There's something soft about all this. Even when it's awkward, even when it's strange, the past, in its own fumbling way, was trying to get love right. Maybe not so different from now. You wander deeper into the village, where the main path narrows into a cobbled lane hemmed in by timbered houses leaning slightly inward, like they're eavesdropping on secrets. The clamor of music and market stalls fades, replaced by the quiet creak of shutters and the soft rustle of a breeze catching the corner of a faded tapestry. A group of boys races past you, laughing, tossing something back and forth. You catch a glimpse. It's an apple, slightly bruised but clearly prized. It bounces from one pair of hands to another until it finally lands at the feet of a girl sitting on a stoop. She picks it up, inspects it, then, without a word, takes a bite. The boys erupt in cheers. It seems like a game, but as an older woman chuckles nearby and mutters, She's picked him. You realize it's not just child's play. You've just witnessed one of the more curious forms of medieval courtship, the fruit toss. Throwing fruit, especially apples, was a legitimate way to signal romantic interest. If the recipient caught it and took a bite, it meant there was at least a spark of possibility. If they dropped it, well, that was a polite no. And if they threw it back at your head, that was a less polite one. You smile as you recall the perfumed apple from earlier. It all connects. These symbols and actions were part of a language, cobbled together from gestures and glances, cloves and ribbons, and apples. Apparently, you pass by a low window and overhear a conversation between two elderly women peeling carrots into a basin. One says, "My Thomas gave me a pear. He didn't even wash it. Still married him." The other shrugs. "Better than my Edgar. He just handed me a turnip and called it fate." You keep walking, hiding a grin. Soon, you find yourself standing in the shadow of a thatched roof hut where a crooked sign reads, "Remedies and Fortunes." You push open the door. A bell made of clinking spoons jangles above your head. Inside, it's dim and earthy, dried herbs hang from the ceiling in bundles, and the air smells of smoke, thyme, and something vaguely metallic. Behind the counter is a woman who could be anywhere from 40 to 100. Her eyes are sharp, though, and she knows exactly why you've come. Without a word, she reaches for a jar filled with teeth. You blink. She chuckles softly. "Ground tooth and rue for love potions," she adds, as if clarifying. "Not human teeth, dear pig." You nod, unsure if that makes it better. Love potions in medieval times were rarely elegant. Forget roses and champagne. Back then, your romantic elixir might include crushed worms, rose hips, fennel, and yes, teeth. The idea was that ingesting something difficult, even revolting, was proof of desire. If you were willing to drink it, you were serious. And if the person you liked drank it, well, maybe they'd like you back, or at least be too nauseous to argue. You ask her if they ever worked. She shrugs. Sometimes people fall in love just because they want to believe it's possible. She begins to scoop the powder into a tiny cloth pouch. But most of the time, she adds, they just get a good story. A bell rings again as you exit, and the sunlight feels surprisingly bright after the gloom. The scent of roasted barley drifts from a nearby oven. You follow it, ducking under a low arch, and emerge into another courtyard where a small crowd has gathered. At the center, a young man in patched breeches and a slightly too large tunic is reciting a poem. His voice is shaky, but determined. Every line rhymes. Every third word is heart. You wince. But so does everyone else, lovingly. This is the noble tradition of public poetry. Chivalric codes encourage men to express devotion through words, even if those words were awkward. Especially if they were awkward. The vulnerability was the point. You notice the woman he's reciting to is trying hard not to smile, and perhaps even harder not to laugh. But she doesn't walk away. Instead, when he finishes, she hands him a single white feather. He clutches it like a holy relic. Feathers were a common love token, especially swan or goose, symbolic of loyalty. They also carried practical meaning. Swans mate for life, and geese. Well, they're loud enough that no affair could remain secret. You take a seat on the edge of the well, letting your feet rest as you watch the courtyard empty. A gentle hush falls, broken only by the cooing of a pigeon on the roof. It's in this quiet that an old man settles beside you. He's wearing a cloak with a patch sewn over the heart. Not a crest, not a name, but a stitched outline of a pear. He sees you looking and smiles. "My wife embroidered that when I went off to market the first time," he says. "Said it was so the barmaid would know I was taken." You ask if it worked. He shrugs. Barmaids still winked, but I winked less. You both laugh, gently, and you realize that behind every odd tradition, every awkward poem or pungent potion, there were real people just trying to figure out how to connect, how to express affection without the right words, how to say, "You matter to me," with fruit or feathers or terrible verse. Historians still argue whether medieval dating was more about politics than passion, especially for the noble classes. But stories like these, from market stalls and back alleys and haylofts, suggest something else, something softer. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the village lull you, the creak of a shutter, the scrape of a broom, the distant pluck of a lute string. It's as if the past is breathing softly beside you, not demanding anything, just offering itself up, awkward and sincere. And you're just sitting with it. A gust of wind brushes past your cheek, bringing with it the faint aroma of wood smoke and blooming marjoram. The village seems to sigh with you, settling deeper into its slow rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays in protest, as if romance has somehow inconvenienced it. You rise from the well's edge and drift toward a narrow alley that bends like a question mark. It opens onto a small green where a handful of villagers are gathered, not for commerce or music, but for something more curious. A man stands atop a low barrel, holding a feathered cap in one hand and a piece of parchment in the other. He clears his throat, bows dramatically, and begins what can only be described as theater. Except it's not quite theater. It's something more specific, a chivalric display. He declares his undying love for a woman named Beatrice, who, you note, is clearly trying to hide behind a cart of cabbages. His words are lofty, full of allegory and noble suffering. He compares her to the moon, to spring, to a particularly radiant fish, which earns him a few coughs that might be laughter. Still, he goes on, holding his feather high like a knight's banner. In medieval Europe, particularly among those who could read just enough to stumble through a sonnet, public declarations were a kind of social theater. You didn't just court someone privately, you performed your longing. You turned romance into a spectacle, inviting not just your beloved but the entire community to participate. And they did. Cheers, booing, someone offers the man a potato. A boy nearby leans toward you and whispers, if she gives him her glove, it means he can try again next week. You blink. A glove? That's new. As you watch Beatrice, red-faced but smiling, reach slowly into her satchel and toss him a dainty glove, slightly muddy, but symbolic nonetheless. The crowd erupts in applause. The man bows, twice, and you realize this entire exchange, though ridiculous, has its own gentle gravity. You stroll onward, amused and oddly moved. Near the edge of the green is a woman arranging a pile of books. Most are leather-bound, their spines too cracked to read. She notices you and gestures toward a slim volume on top. Horoscopes, she says, for lovers, some accurate, some entertaining. You thumb through a few pages. Best days to propose, worst times to argue, and a chart explaining how the position of Jupiter influences nose size and romantic suitors. It seems outlandish. But then again, you remember the couple in the orchard and the boy counting constellations on his fingers. The stars mattered. They weren't just lights in the sky. They were instructions, warnings, promises. Astrology played a surprisingly powerful role in medieval relationships. Families consulted astrologers before arranging betrothals. Lovers used planetary charts to interpret their fates. Even monarchs delayed weddings based on lunar phases. The heavens weren't just decorative, they were guides. And if Saturn happened to be cranky on the day you planned to confess your feelings, you might reschedule your entire declaration. You close the book and hand it back gently. She nods with a smile and says, Mars is in retrograde today. You both chuckle. Your walk takes you past a row of flowering bushes tangled in a wooden fence. A boy and girl sit nearby, their backs to you, whispering. On the ground in front of them is a bundle of straw twisted into a strange little figure. Not quite a doll, not quite an animal. Curious, you step a little closer. The girl is tying something around the figure's waist, a blue thread and a tiny metal spoon. She speaks softly as she does, almost chanting. The boy mirrors her gestures on a second doll. You've stumbled upon a folk ritual. These little straw charms, known in some regions as love puppets or heart bundles, were created in secret and often buried near a lover's doorstep. They were meant to tie two people together symbolically, binding their affection with objects only they understood. Each thread represented a promise, each trinket, a memory. Some were playful, others solemn. It wasn't magic, not exactly. It was something closer to storytelling, a shared narrative, whispered into straw and string. You quietly leave them to their work, stepping away without interrupting the moment. Around the next bend, you spot a tall wooden post in the center of a dusty square. Tied to it, fluttering like a captured flag, is a man's tunic. Below it, a chalkboard with a single sentence written in shaky script. He loved 3 girls. They all found out. You stare for a moment before realizing this isn't just gossip. It's punishment. Public shaming, surprisingly, had its own role in romantic dynamics. If someone broke a promise of betrothal or misled a partner, or 2 or 3, the village sometimes responded with a spectacle. Garments were hung, poems were posted, and people were displayed in symbolic ways, often with their faces spared, but their reputations gently roasted. Was it cruel? Maybe. But it was also humorous, even healing, a way for the community to acknowledge love gone wrong without burning it to the ground, like scolding a toddler with a wink. You walk on, trying to picture a world where heartbreak could be chalked on a sign and left to flutter in the wind like laundry. Something about it feels honest, if not always fair. Your feet grow tired, but you keep walking. Something in the rhythm of the village pulls you onward. You pass a small doorway with 2 carved hearts above it. A newlywed home, perhaps. Through the open window, you hear laughter and the sound of a spoon tapping the rim of a bowl. Inside, someone says, "He forgot the onions," again. And someone else replies, "Let him live. He remembered the wine." You smile. Romance, even in its messiest moments, survives. You wander away from the little house with the carved hearts, the soft hum of domestic joy lingering like warmth on your skin. The village feels quieter now, as if it's paused to catch its breath after all the declarations and dramatics. Even the chickens seem subdued. You follow a winding lane that curls gently toward the river, where the trees grow thicker and the stones beneath your feet are smooth from centuries of passing souls. There, beside the gently flowing water, you spot a man seated on a log. His cloak is muddied at the hem, and his fingers are ink-stained. In his lap rests a leather-bound book, its pages worn at the edges. He scribbles something with great care, then sighs and rips the page out, crumpling it with a dramatic flair. You approach quietly, but he hears you anyway. He turns and offers a tired smile. "Poetry," he says, gesturing toward the mess of parchment around him. "It's not for the faint of heart." You nod sympathetically and sit on a nearby stone. He begins reading aloud from one of the pages he hasn't thrown. It's a poem, earnest, overly long, with too many metaphors about rain and longing. But it's honest. You can hear it in the way his voice trembles near the end. He's not performing for applause. He's processing. The poem ends with a single, quiet line. "And I wait beneath her window, though she's long since shut the shutters." There's a silence after that, not awkward, reflective. Then, without looking at you, he says. She smiled at me once, during Lent. That was 2 years ago. You don't say anything. You don't have to. In the medieval world, unrequited love was not only common, it was expected, especially among poets, students, knights, and anyone whose love would never be convenient. Courtly love, as they called it, thrived on distance and suffering. The longing was the story, and the story was the point. To pine was noble. To wait in silence, to suffer privately, to love from afar. These were seen not as tragedies, but as virtuous acts of devotion. Love, in that world, didn't always mean being loved back. Sometimes it meant never being loved back, and loving anyway. He stands, brushing crumbs of parchment from his cloak, and bids you farewell with a small bow. If she opens the window this year, he says, I'll pretend I wasn't watching. You smile at the absurd sweetness of it all, and keep walking. Farther up the river, you come across a hayloft behind a crumbling barn. A few feet away, someone's propped a ladder, a little too obviously. You hear hushed giggles, followed by a sharp whisper. Shh! Someone's coming! You pause, debating whether to pass by or pretend to be very interested in the nearby beeswax. From inside the loft, a girl calls softly. Wait, is it your father again? A boy answers. Worse, it's the priest. You chuckle under your breath. Not all medieval love was noble and distant. Some of it was messy, secretive, and decidedly improper. Peasant lovers, in particular, often had to dodge layers of control, parents, clergy, local customs, and the looming shadow of arranged marriage. Many weren't allowed to choose their own partners. Family alliances, dowries, and land mattered more than affection. So, young people learned to steal time where they could, in barns, under bridges, or beside spinning wheels late at night. And when those options failed, well, there was always the hayloft. It wasn't rebellion, necessarily. It was survival, a quiet insistence that love, however brief, deserved its moment. You eventually move on, leaving the whispering behind. Up ahead, a festival banner flaps lazily above a stone archway. It leads into a square filled with laughter and music. But something here feels different. The people are masked. Every face is hidden. Some behind painted wood, others with cloth tied behind the ears. And in the center of it all, a curious game is unfolding. A woman in red stands blindfolded, holding a long ribbon in one hand. Around her, a half circle of masked men recite riddles, one at a time, their voices muffled and disguised. Her task? To choose the one she thinks is her suitor, based on nothing but his voice, his wit, and the cleverness of his words. You watch as she tilts her head, listening carefully, furrowing her brow in amusement. The riddles range from clever to absurd, and one includes something about a turnip and a goose that makes the crowd snort with delight. She eventually holds out the ribbon, pointing uncertainly. The chosen man removes his mask, and she gasps. Not her intended. Everyone laughs, even she. And the real suitor? He's behind her, laughing loudest of all. Later, you see him tie the ribbon around her wrist anyway. She lets him. These masked festivals, part courtship, part chaos, served as one of the few times strict social roles were temporarily suspended. People could speak freely, flirt across class, even propose mischief they would never dare try in daylight. It was a ritual of reversal, a way to test the waters under the cover of anonymity. Historians still argue whether these festivals were romantic or ridiculous. But watching her laughter as the ribbon flutters from her wrist, you're inclined to believe they had a little bit of both. You leave the square as the sun dips lower, casting a honeyed light over the rooftops. The village exhales again. candles flicker in windows. You hear soft songs drifting from kitchens and the occasional pop of firewood. As you pass a small church, you spot an apothecary tucked into its side wall, nearly hidden by ivy. The door's ajar. You step in. Inside, glass jars line the shelves, labeled with everything from cramp bark to lady's mantle. A young woman stands at the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she points to two specific jars. One for attraction, she murmurs. The other for the opposite. The old apothecary doesn't flinch. She begins measuring both with the same steady hand. You stand quietly, feeling like you've stepped into a decision more ancient than time. A hope for love. A hope to avoid it. Both in one breath. The girl pays in buttons and honeycomb, then slips out the door, her shawl trailing behind her like a sigh. You stay there for a moment longer, breathing in the dusty herbal air. There's something deeply human about it all. These rituals, these choices, these strange little potions. 1,000 years later, and love still carries the same weight. We still ask the same questions, even if we use different herbs. And some of us still leave with both bottles. As you step out of the apothecary, the evening air greets you with a cool whisper, like the world is beginning to hush itself. The ivy behind you stirs gently in the breeze, brushing against the stone wall like an old friend offering reassurance. You follow a lantern-lit path that curves through the edge of the village, its cobbles uneven and warm from the sun's slow retreat. A soft murmur of voices draws your attention to a gathering beneath a tall oak tree. A small crowd encircling a man with wild hair and a walking stick carved with strange symbols. His cloak is patched in 7 places, and he stands beside a crude wooden board with chalk drawings on it. Hearts, broken arrows, and one rather dramatic sketch of a weeping goat. You pause, uncertain whether to laugh or listen. But the crowd is attentive. Something is about to begin. The man, clearly some sort of wandering storyteller or hedge magician, taps his stick once against the ground. Tonight, he announces, we speak of curses and love. A collective hush falls. Even the chickens nearby seem to lean in. He begins telling the tale of a man, a poor cobbler, who had fallen deeply, foolishly, disastrously in love with a noble woman far beyond his reach. When she chose another, he was said to have carved her name backwards into his walking stick, wrapped it with strands of his own hair, and buried it beneath the old gallows tree. She married. Her new husband fell ill within a fortnight. Their livestock began dying off. The bread never rose again in their house. Eventually, people whispered that love rejected had turned bitter, that the cobbler's sorrow had become spell work. As the tale unfolds, the crowd murmurs and nods. Some seem skeptical, others oddly empathetic. You, too, aren't sure what to make of it. But the storyteller's final words linger in the air like smoke. Be careful with a heart that loves you more than it should. It may remember longer than you'd like. You walk away with a small shiver, unsure whether it was the story or the breeze that caused it. As you meander back toward the village square, your thoughts drift, not just to curses, but to the quiet ways people handled heartbreak. In a world without text messages or playlists, when love soured, sometimes all a person had left was ritual. A whispered name into a bottle, a thread burned over candlelight, a name scratched beneath a floorboard and never spoken again. Some believed it was magic. Others simply needed it to feel like something mattered. You pass a modest cottage with a garden out front, and a woman is tending to her herbs. She hums softly, completely absorbed in her task. You ask what she's growing. She lists them without looking up. Marjoram, basil, dill, all good for the heart. Then she smiles. But silence, that's the strongest charm. You ask what she means. Say nothing. If they're meant for you, they'll stay. If not, they'll keep walking. She snips a sprig of lemon balm and tucks it into your hand. This one's for letting go. You continue walking with the herb cradled gently in your palm, its clean, citrusy scent grounding you in the present. Even as your thoughts drift to those long-ago hearts, hopeful, foolish, stubborn, like ours, soon. Your path opens onto a long communal table lit by dozens of tiny oil lamps. It's the end of some kind of feast, bread crusts scattered, mugs half full, cheese rinds licked clean. But the main event now seems to be the silence. Couples sit shoulder to shoulder, some leaning in close, others barely touching. No one speaks, not even a whisper. A sign nearby reads, "Feast of quiet longing, no talking after sundown." You take a seat at the edge, unsure of the rules, but no one stops you. You watch as two people across from you communicate entirely through glances and gestures. One pushes a piece of bread toward the other, who shakes their head. A moment later, the second offers a cherry. The first takes it. Another pair, older, maybe 50, maybe 80, seem to speak through eye crinkles and the angle of their elbows. She moves her hand closer. He shifts his mug an inch, somehow. It feels like an entire conversation. It's strangely moving. In this enforced silence, everything else becomes amplified. The flicker of a lamp, the lift of an eyebrow, the soft clink of ceramic against wood. Love here is quiet, almost sacred. Words would only disrupt it. You break off a piece of crust and chew slowly, watching the room move in this unspoken rhythm. Historians still argue whether these silent feasts were ritual, punishment, or poetry. Some believe they were invented by monasteries. Others claim they originated with harvest festivals, where loss and gratitude mingled too closely for speech. But here, in this moment, it feels like grace. As the feast slowly ends, guests begin placing small objects in the center of the table: folded paper cranes, rings made of grass, hollowed-out walnut shells, coins with holes through the middle. You ask someone near you, in a whisper, what it means. Things left unsaid, they reply, not whispering, just barely audible. You leave behind what you can't carry. You decide to leave the sprig of lemon balm. It feels right. Back outside. The sky is fully dark now. The stars are out, not scattered, but gathered, as if huddling together for warmth. You tilt your head back and spot Orion, faint but familiar, chasing his forever distant prey across the heavens. Even the stars are caught in their own stories. You walk along a narrow bridge at the edge of the village. Below it, the water glides like glass, smooth and black, holding the moon's reflection steady. At the center of the bridge stands a single post wrapped in cloth. Tied around it are dozens, maybe hundreds, of ribbons. Each ribbon bears a name. Some are faded, others freshly inked. You reach out and touch one. It's soft, fraying. Someone's love, bound in fabric and left to the wind. A young boy appears beside you, barefoot and blinking sleepily. He doesn't speak, just ties on a new ribbon, nods once, and walks away. You stand there for a while, watching the ribbons flutter. Some are tangled, others wave freely. Together, they move like the breath of a sleeping world, quiet, patient, full of unspoken things. You don't tie one on? Not yet, but you promise yourself that if you do, it will be in the softest thread you can find. The next morning arrives softly, with no fanfare, just the steady rustle of leaves, the lowing of a distant cow, and the comforting scent of damp earth warming beneath the sun. You stretch your legs on a dewy path, wiping a few droplets from your shoes with the hem of your cloak. The village is stirring slowly, as though still half dreaming, and you follow the movement like a breeze tracing a lazy current. Past the baker's open window, where cinnamon and rye hover sweetly in the air. You find yourself drawn to a side street that feels less like a road and more like a secret. It bends through two crooked houses, leaning toward each other like old conspirators, and eventually widens into a small courtyard, hemmed by low stone walls and flowering hedges. There, in the middle, stands a wooden post crowned with a ring of feathers and dried rosemary. Beneath it sits a low bench, and beside that bench is a heavy sack, bursting, quite literally, with sleeves, dozens of them, all colors and fabrics, some velvet, others linen, some plain and frayed, others embroidered with tiny initials, stitched in earnest or obsession. You lean in, careful not to disturb the arrangement. Each sleeve is folded neatly, then tied with a length of twine and a tiny note. Robert, 1327, she never looked back. L, from the one with freckles. No name, just red, and mine. This is the bench of remnants. Someone says behind you. A wiry man with dirt under his nails and a nose pink from sun or drink. People bring what's left, he explains, gesturing toward the pile. Tokens from courtships that ended, or never began at all. We keep them here, so they don't haunt drawers. You ask if people come back to reclaim them. Sometimes, he shrugs, but usually not. There's something tender about the way he says it, not mournful, just matter of fact, like he's speaking of rain that doesn't come back once it falls. You take a seat on the bench and listen as he tells you the story of a woman who once left 7 sleeves in one morning, one for each man who'd proposed to her over the course of a year. None had quite made her heart tilt. She said they were good men, he adds, but she was waiting for a terrible one. You chuckle, and he disappears back into the hedgerow as quietly as he arrived. The bench, now warmed by the sun, invites lingering. You let your fingers trail across a particularly worn sleeve, velvet turned threadbare. The note simply reads, "For the one who tried but never knew how." You imagine 1,000 stories stitched into these remnants, all left behind with the quiet grace of someone ready to let go. After a while, you rise and make your way toward the center of the village, where a new kind of commotion is gathering. It's not loud, more of a murmur, a steady shuffle of people heading in one direction. You fall into step beside them, carried forward by the soft tide of curiosity. At the heart of the green is a raised wooden platform, and on it, a pair of lovers stands back to back, blindfolded. They're surrounded by a circle of villagers holding lengths of twine, flower garlands, and bells. A man with a solemn voice, part efficient, part storyteller, stands between them, holding what looks like a very old book. This is the love trial. You've heard whispers of it, a strange and symbolic ritual performed by couples on the cusp of marriage, or by those seeking the community's blessing. It's not legally binding, but it is emotionally revealing. The lovers are led, hand in hand, through a simple obstacle course, made of soft hay mounds, low wooden rails, and narrow paths lined with flower. The goal is not to move quickly, but to move together, to communicate through pressure and instinct, to trust without words. One step too far to the left, and flower puffs into the air like snow. A misstep backward, and the twine tugs gently at their waists. But when they move in sync, the path remains quiet, undisturbed. The crowd watches without judgment. In fact, they murmur encouragement. A few older women even hum softly, creating a rhythm for the couple to follow. There's something deeply human about the scene, awkward and poetic, sincere and silly all at once. Eventually, the pair reaches the final bell. The woman rings it, the man echoes it, and they are allowed to remove their blindfolds. Their smiles are wide and relieved. The crowd claps, but not loudly, just enough to say, "Well done. We see you. You sit on the edge of the crowd for a while longer, watching as another couple prepares to take their place. This pair looks less certain, but they tie the blindfolds just the same. Historians still argue whether the love trial began as a spiritual ritual or a theatrical village invention meant to replace formal betrothal contracts. Some say it was born from old Roman fertility customs. Others claim it started when a farmer's daughter fell in love with a shepherd and they needed a public way to prove it without the mess. Whatever the origin, the effect is undeniable. You watch a third couple stumble and laugh, a fourth fall completely into the hay and emerge laughing too hard to stand. There's no penalty here, just shared effort. You leave before the fifth pair begins. The sun is now high and warm on your shoulders. You wander toward the stream again, this time hearing the crisp crackle of linen drying on lines stretched between willows. A group of women is gathered at the water's edge, scrubbing, rinsing, gossiping with hushed delight. "Did you see his boots?" one says. "A man in love would never wear those." Another laughs. "That was a man afraid to be in love." The third just smirks. "Well, she looked like she knew what she was doing." You pretend not to listen, but their chatter floats behind you like a trail of breadcrumbs. Proof that romance is as much about observation as participation. You reach a small, grassy bank and sit beneath a tree with bark carved full of initials and crooked hearts. Some have dates, others just symbols, a sun and moon, a fish and a star. You wonder how many of these pairs ever lasted, how many fell apart, how many still come back, year after year, to check that their heart remains etched into time. You rest your hand on one carving, a heart so weathered it's barely visible, and close your eyes. The past, it seems, is not a closed book. It's a story still being whispered by leaves, water, and worn wood, and you are here to listen. You rise slowly from beneath the carved tree, brushing stray leaves from your cloak. The initials etched into the bark linger in your thoughts like echoes. You wonder if the people who made them ever imagined that, centuries later, someone would sit beneath their old declarations and feel the faint warmth still clinging to them. The village behind you continues its gentle hum, but you take a new path, one that winds behind the baker's chimney and past a row of beehives that buzz without urgency. It leads to a modest meadow where the grass grows long and soft, like an old wool blanket no one wants to fold away. At the far end stands a long table shaded by a leaning elder tree, and behind it, a row of women and men arrange objects with great care. You approach and read the handwritten sign propped up near a basket of stones, "The table of things left behind." At first, it looks like a lost and found, but the closer you look, the more you realize this is something else entirely. Each item is small, seemingly insignificant: a broken hair comb, a faded handkerchief, a button shaped like a duck, a candle stub still tied with a blue thread. But beside each item is a folded note, most no bigger than a thumb, and you begin to read them. This was hers. She never came back for it. "He gave this to me when I thought I loved him. I was wrong. I never knew whose it was, only that I carried it too long. It's a museum of almost loves and maybe loves, of affection misplaced or misnamed, but remembered nonetheless." You linger beside a pewter ring with a dented edge. Its note reads simply, "He meant it, but I didn't." The honesty of it feels like a breeze, not cold, not warm, but real. You speak quietly to the woman managing the table, a weaver with kind eyes and hands stained with dye. She tells you that people bring their tokens when they're ready to move on, but not forget. "Some things," she says, "don't belong in drawers or fire. They belong in air, where they can finish saying what they meant." You nod, understanding more than you expected to. Then she smiles and adds, "And when someone feels brave, they're allowed to take one with them if it speaks to something they haven't said yet. You don't take anything, Not yet. But the offer stays with you as you walk. Past the meadow lies a narrow trail where the trees grow close together, their branches arching above to form a kind of living hallway. Sunlight filters through in dappled gold, and each footstep feels quieter than the last. Eventually, the trees part, revealing a clearing with a ring of stones in the center, smooth, low, and space just wide enough for two people to sit between each. You find a place on one of the stones and sit. A small plaque near your feet reads, "This is where people go when they're almost ready." There are no names, no instructions, just the silence of leaves whispering and the occasional chirp of a bird who seems to have forgotten what season it is. After a while, a young couple arrives, barefoot and solemn. They don't speak. She holds a book with a ribbon tucked inside. He carries a single glove, worn thin at the knuckles. They sit across from each other, just outside the circle. Neither tries to enter. Not yet. This is the circle of pauses, someone once called it. A place for those moments before decisions, before confessions, before departures. A space carved out for hesitation, the most human of emotions. You watch as the couple remains still, as though time has decided to fold around them. Eventually, she places the book on the grass. He lays the glove beside it. Then, together, they stand, bow slightly to the stones, and walk away. Nothing said, nothing shattered, just paused. It reminds you that even in a world of rituals and riddles, some parts of love exist only in the space between actions, in what's almost said, almost done, almost begun. And maybe that's where the truest feelings live, in the moments we almost dared. You rise, letting the quiet settle into your shoulders like a shawl. As you walk back through the tree-covered path, your thoughts drift again, not forward or backward, but inward. Back in the village square, the energy has shifted. The market stalls are gone, replaced by long benches and lanterns strung across wooden beams. It's nearing dusk again, and the air hums with that peculiar anticipation of something unspoken about to unfold. At the far end of the square, a small stage has been set. A curtain of patchwork cloth flutters gently in the breeze. A bell rings once, softly, and people begin to gather. The play begins without warning. A woman stands center stage, dressed in a simple gown and holding a piece of parchment. She reads aloud, not a script, but what sounds like a letter, a real one. Her voice is steady, almost too steady, as she says, "I waited for you, not just yesterday, but on the second Tuesday in May, the one with the crooked clouds. You didn't come. I forgave you anyway." The crowd is silent, no shifting, no coughing, just listening. Another figure appears, a man this time, and he responds not with words, but with a gesture. He kneels, not dramatically, just enough to say, "I hear you." Then he opens a small wooden box and lifts out a ribbon. He ties it around a wooden post and exits. This is not a play in the traditional sense. It is more like a memory being reenacted, a weaving together of forgotten confessions and never sent letters. One by one, villagers take the stage, some reading aloud, others simply placing objects, lighting candles, drawing shapes in chalk, then stepping away. It's not polished, it's not perfect, but it's deeply human. You realize, sitting there in the warm glow of lantern light, that this might be the most honest kind of theater, not for applause, but for release, not to impress, but to heal. Historians still argue whether these communal memory plays served any real purpose beyond storytelling. But in this moment, as a woman leaves behind a braid of yarn and whispers, "This was how I loved you, until I couldn't," you know the answer. Purpose doesn't always come with a name. It just comes with the courage to leave something behind. The The play drifts to a close not with a final bow or a curtain drop, but with a hush so complete you wonder if even the birds are holding their breath. The last figure steps quietly off the stage, leaving behind nothing but a folded scarf and a faint trace of lavender in the air. Then someone, a child, maybe, begins to hum, softly, uncertainly, a tune you don't recognize, but it wraps around the square like twilight itself. You stay seated long after the others begin to rise and murmur their way back into motion. There's no applause, no one claps. It wouldn't fit. Instead, people place a hand to their heart, or nod, or close their eyes for a beat longer than usual. It feels like the performance didn't end. It just dissolved into everyone watching. You rise slowly and make your way out of the square, following a footpath lit by candle stubs pressed into nooks of the stone wall. The path curves past the mill stream, quiet now, and leads to a clearing you hadn't noticed before. Here, wooden benches form a ring around a low fire pit, though no flames burn now. Instead, jars filled with fireflies glow softly at the edges, casting a golden shimmer on the grass. In the center of the ring sits a woman holding a spindle. Her gray hair is braided down her back, and her voice greets you before you've said a word. Come to learn how to spin love into thread? You chuckle, thinking she's joking, but she gestures to the spindle and repeats herself, not as a question this time, but as a quiet invitation. You sit across from her on a woven mat, and she hands you a bundle of raw wool. It's soft, cloud-like, and smells faintly of sheep and thyme. Every thread tells a story, she says. The tighter it's spun, the more someone needed to hold on. She begins to work the spindle, slowly twisting the wool into yarn. In some villages, she continues, girls would spin one thread each time they missed someone. When the spindle was full, they'd knot it around the wrist and wait. If the person returned, they'd cut it off together. You ask what happened if the person never came. She shrugs, still spinning. Then you had a very warm bracelet. You try spinning your own piece. It's clumsy at first, uneven and lumpy, but she doesn't correct you. She just nods, watching the yarn grow longer between your fingers. Nearby, another person joins, then another, soon. The circle fills with quiet, concentrated motion. Each person with their own spindle, their own thoughts, their own unspoken name tied to the fibers slipping through their hands. Historians still argue whether this kind of ritual was real or simply the invention of folklore layered over daily life. But sitting there, surrounded by strangers all silently spinning something into being, you think it doesn't really matter. What matters is the pause, the care, the space to name your feeling without ever speaking it aloud. After a while, the woman helps you tie your thread into a loop. You hold it in your palm, rough in places, soft in others, imperfect, yours. She smiles and whispers, "Take it with you? It'll remember, even if you forget." You thank her, tuck the thread into your pocket, and step away from the glow of the firefly jars. The world feels slower now, like it's walking beside you at your pace, not hurrying ahead. You return to the path and follow the sound of music, soft and uneven, drifting from a barn lit by candlelight through its open beams. Inside, the space is warm and filled with movement, not dancing exactly, more like swaying. A fiddle sings in the far corner, while someone keeps time by stomping gently on the wooden floorboards. There are no formal steps, no leads or followers, just people, young, old, partnered, alone, moving in whatever way feels right. You take a seat near the doorway, watching as a man with a crooked smile and an embroidered vest leads a slow circle with a woman balancing a jug on her head. A child tugs at her skirts. A grandfather twirls twice, forgets his rhythm, and laughs too hard to care. This is the dance after everything else, After the declarations, the silences, the stories half told and never finished. This is the part where no one needs to explain anything anymore. It's the exhale after holding in too much. A girl sitting beside you taps your knee. "You're supposed to join," you ask. "Even if I don't know the steps?" She grins. "Especially then." So you rise, hesitant but willing, and step into the circle. Someone takes your hand, soft, dry, firm, and you're pulled gently into motion. You sway, you pivot, you misstep, no one minds. The floor creaks, the candles flicker, the music never speeds up, as though it knows you need time to remember what it means to feel safe in movement. Around you, people share nods, touches on the elbow, wordless reassurance that there's no wrong way to show up here. You notice one couple moving so slowly they were barely swaying, but their foreheads rest against each other, and their feet stay in sync like they've danced together in 100 lives. Eventually, you step back and sit again, heart a little fuller, breath a little slower. The music continues, but now from outside, you hear a soft bell chime. Once, then twice, then 3 times. Someone near you murmurs, "The Watcher's Hour." You follow them out into the night air, joining a small group gathering at the edge of the village where the stone path meets a wooden gate. A single lantern hangs on a hook, swaying in the breeze. This is where the quietest ritual of all takes place. Each night at this hour, one person is chosen to keep watch until dawn, not for danger, but for dreams. They sit alone beside the gate with a book in their lap, and each person who passes by offers them a word, just one. The watcher writes them down, one by one, until the page is full. You stand near the edge, unsure if it's your turn to speak. But when the watcher glances at you, expectant and calm, you realize this is part of the ritual too. Everyone brings something. So, you whisper the word that's been sitting in your chest since this morning. The watcher nods and writes it down without question. You walk away feeling oddly lighter, and behind you, the lantern sways again, like it's catching your secret and holding it safely until sunrise. The village lies quiet now, blanketed in a hush that feels deeper than silence. It's not the stillness of sleep, not quite. It's the kind of stillness that comes after many words have been spoken, many feelings breathed out into the air, and the world has softly agreed to hold them without judgment. You walk along the stone wall that curves around the old chapel, your hand grazing its weathered surface, fingertips skimming lichen and thyme. Up ahead, you spot a flickering glow near a bench that faces the woods. A candle in a glass jar. Someone has left it there with a slip of parchment weighted beneath a small stone. You approach quietly, not wanting to intrude, though no one else is near. The note reads, "I didn't know how to say it, so I left it here." Beside the candle is a simple token, a wooden button carved in the shape of a star. You sit down slowly, drawn not just by the flame, but by the honesty of the offering. In this place, people don't hide their confusion. They honor it. They give their unsaid things a home. For a while, you sit with it all. The warmth of the glass, the soft crackle of the candle, the invisible weight of emotions left behind by someone you'll never meet. You imagine them standing here, holding that button in their palm, letting go not because they stopped caring, but because the silence asked for something smaller than words. A soft shuffle draws your attention. A girl no older than 10 approaches with a jar tucked beneath her arm. Inside are folded scraps of cloth, each a different color, some embroidered, some plain. She sits beside you without a word and begins laying the pieces out on the bench between you. You ask her gently what they're for. She points to the forest. That's the path of mended things. You blink. You've never heard of it. She nods as if reading your mind. You only see it if you're ready. Then she offers you a square of red fabric. Take one. You'll know what to do with it when you're there. You thank her, fold the cloth carefully, and rise to follow her gaze. The forest ahead looks no different from any other patch of trees. Tall trunks, tangled underbrush, shadows pooled like ink. But as you step beyond the bench, something shifts. The air smells greener, closer, like moss and pine needles and something sweet you can't quite name. You take a step onto a narrow path, not paved, not marked, just worn soft by barefoot passage. The forest hums low around you, as if its heartbeat is buried deep in the soil. Along the path, you notice small flags tied to branches, squares of cloth just like the one you carry. Each knotted gently, none torn or frayed. Some are faded by weather, others newly placed. One has beads sewn into the corners. Another is embroidered with a name, almost illegible now. You take your time. There's no rush here. Eventually, the path widens into a hollow where tree trunks form a loose circle, and in the center stands a wooden loom. It's not large, child-sized almost, but sturdy. Someone has begun weaving a long, uneven tapestry, its threads mismatched and wildly colored. No pattern, no symmetry, but somehow it works. There's no one in sight, just the loom, waiting. You walk forward and tie your red cloth gently onto the end of one loose thread. It catches the light and flutters for a moment before settling into stillness. That's all. That's enough. You sit for a while beneath the trees. The wind moves slowly, like a lullaby. You think of all the things people try to repair: hearts, words, hopes, memories. Some things aren't meant to go back to how they were, but maybe they don't need to. Maybe mending just means caring for the pieces. When you finally return to the village, the path feels different beneath your feet, like it's holding you a little more kindly. By the time you reach the common green, a soft mist has settled. The lanterns have been doused, and only the watcher's post glows in the distance. Most windows are dark now, though a few flicker, not with urgency, but comfort. You stop at the edge of the fountain in the square. The water is still. You lean over slightly and see your reflection, not distorted, not sharpened, just you, quiet and whole, even in your questions. A soft rustle to your left. A man in his 60s, perhaps, sits on the fountain's edge with a bowl of walnuts in his lap. He's shelling them with methodical care, dropping the halves into a cloth pouch. You nod a greeting. He returns it without speaking. You sit beside him, and for a long while, neither of you says anything. The cracking of shells, the cool stone, the shared silence. It's enough. Eventually, he offers you a walnut. You accept. It's sweet and slightly bitter, and you chew slowly. I used to save all the shells, he says at last, voice gravelly but warm. Thought I might make something from them. You ask what? He smiles, barely. I never figured it out, but I kept them anyway, not because they were useful, because they were proof I tried. You let that settle between you like a blanket. In this village, with its strange rituals and quiet honesty, nothing is wasted, not broken things, not soft missteps, not even the shells we leave behind. You stand, thank him softly, and walk a final circuit of the square. There's no destination now, just the rhythm of your footsteps on worn earth, and the faint sound of a night bird calling somewhere out near the river. A girl walks past you carrying a bowl of flower petals. She tosses a few into the breeze without explanation. They drift lazily, like bits of old songs, and vanish into the darkness. You turn toward the cottage where your borrowed bed waits, its shutters slightly ajar to let the night in. But before you go inside, you glance back, just once. The square glows faintly under the mist. The post with the ribbon still stands. The bench with the candle still flickers. And the village, though quiet, does not sleep. It listens. It remembers. It forgives. And tonight, it holds you too. You step inside the cottage, closing the wooden door gently behind you. The latch clicks into place with a sound that feels softer than it should, like the room knows you're tired and doesn't want to startle your thoughts. The hearth glows with the final sighs of the evening fire, casting orange shadows along the stone floor and illuminating the edge of a woolen blanket draped over a nearby chair. You move quietly, the floorboards creaking beneath your steps, not out of protest, but as if they're saying, yes, yes, we remember you. A small table holds a clay jug and a cup, water, left out by someone kind. You take a sip, its coolness sharp against the back of your throat, and you feel the weight of the day beginning to settle into your bones. On the wall beside the narrow bed hangs a piece of embroidery, not grand, not ornate, just a handful of blue and gold thread stitched into the shape of a bird mid-flight. Beneath it, someone has sewn a simple phrase, "Love is a kind of listening." You sit on the edge of the bed and let that line repeat itself in your mind. It doesn't ask anything of you. It just lingers, a truth that doesn't need to be solved or explained. Through the slightly open shutter, you can still see the top of the ribbon post in the square, swaying ever so gently in the wind. You wonder how many ribbons it's held over the years, how many names, how many unspoken promises, tied not to be claimed, but simply to be remembered. As you lie back, the straw mattress creaks but doesn't complain. The quilt is heavy in the way good things are, not burdensome, just certain. And just as your eyes begin to drift closed, you hear a soft knock at the door, not urgent, not afraid, just polite. You rise again and open it slowly. Outside stands a woman with gray streaks in her braid, holding a tray with 2 small bowls of something warm and fragrant. She offers one to you with a nod. No explanation, no expectation, just a kind gesture and a quiet hour. You thank her, and she turns to go, leaving behind the faint scent of nutmeg and barley. You sit at the table, spoon in hand, and take a taste. It's porridge, slightly sweet, slightly spiced, and oddly comforting. Not a feast, but a reminder that care doesn't have to be grand to be real. On the tray, beneath the bowls, is a folded piece of paper. You open it, revealing a single sentence written in looping hand. When you wake, follow the bells. You look toward the window, but the village is still. No sound, no bells, not yet. You finish the last bite and return to bed, placing the note beside the lamp. You fall asleep without meaning to, as if your body and mind have finally agreed to stop negotiating with the day. The night passes like a long, quiet breath. When you open your eyes again, the light outside is pale and blue, the kind of morning that hasn't decided whether to be sunny or not. But then, you hear it, a bell, distant, faint. Then another, closer. You rise, quickly but calmly, wrapping yourself in a cloak and slipping on your shoes. The village is waking with you, smoke beginning to curl from chimneys, voices low and sleepy, doors creaking open like they, too, are rubbing their eyes. You step outside, following the sound. It comes in gentle bursts, not a warning, not a summons, but an invitation. You follow it past the square, where new petals have been tossed during the night, and down toward the southern edge of the village, where the land slopes into fields touched by morning fog. There, in a clearing framed by hedgerows and an old wooden fence, stands a small tower, squat and round, barely taller than the cottages. At its top, a young woman rings a handbell from a window, smiling down as people gather below. She doesn't speak, just gestures for the group to sit. Benches have been laid out in a semicircle, and at the center sits an object covered with a large cloth. You find a place near the back and wait. The cloth is pulled away, revealing a curious wooden contraption, half sculpture, half mechanism. It's made of gears and pulleys, carved birds and tiny hands pointing in different directions. One section is filled with ribbons, another, tiny paper notes rolled into scrolls. There's even a small platform where someone has placed a flower crown woven with wheat and lavender. An elder steps forward, the same man from the walnut bench, and begins to turn a crank slowly. The contraption stirs to life, creaking and humming in odd harmony. A paper scroll unspools. A bird lifts its carved head. One tiny bell rings. Then, a note is drawn from the side and handed to the person nearest it. They read aloud, "Your love was not too much. It was just early." No one laughs, no one sighs. The group simply nods. "This is the clock of mended hours," someone whispers beside you. "It gives back what people left behind." Another scroll is drawn, another note is read. "She never said thank you, but she meant to. It wasn't your fault, not even a little. He remembers. He just doesn't know how to return." The mechanism continues, a slow and gentle release of buried truths. People take turns, not to speak, but to listen. Each message could belong to anyone, or to no one, but somehow, each one lands exactly where it needs to. Historians still argue whether the clock ever functioned in a practical sense, whether its gears truly turned with time, or if it was all just poetic invention. But sitting there in the early light, you feel something rare, the sensation of being seen, even in your quietest places. Eventually, the crank slows. The final scroll emerges. It reads, "You don't have to carry all of it to honor what it was." The elder nods, and the cloth is gently returned over the clock. The crowd begins to disperse in silence, not heavy, not sad, just softened. You walk back through the village as the day fully arrives. Children chase each other through the grass. A woman hangs laundry, humming a tune you heard last night. The ribbon post now holds 3 new strands, one purple, one white, one the color of dried roses. You return to the cottage, fold the note that guided you here, and place it in your pocket beside the red thread you spun under starlight. And for the first time in a long time, you feel not fixed, not solved, but gently aligned with something older than worry and wider than memory. Like you've remembered a song you didn't know you knew. The village breathes into the new day with a kind of ease you've never quite seen before. Not busy, not rushed. Everything seems to move in time with the rising light. You leave the cottage with a slow step, not because you're uncertain where to go, but because everything around you seems to ask that you notice it as you pass. The way the morning mist lifts gently off the thatched rooftops, the way the ivy glistens along the fence posts like 1,000 tiny mirrors. As you turn down a familiar path, you spot the ribbon post again. Someone is tying a 4th ribbon now. A man in a blue tunic with silver thread along the cuffs. He ties it tightly, then places a kiss to the knot before stepping back. His eyes closed for a few extra breaths. He walks away without looking back. You don't ask what it meant. You don't need to. You walk a little farther, your feet bringing you toward the sound of hushed laughter and the occasional splash of water. You soon arrive at the wash house, a wide, open-air space beside the brook, where villagers gather not just to scrub clothes, but to share stories, trade gossip, and sometimes, as you're about to learn, seek blessings. A woman with dark hair and a braid thick as rope gestures for you to come closer. "You've come for the blessing of the sleeve?" she asks. You hesitate. She smiles. "Don't worry. You don't need to bring one. We've got extras." She reaches into a basket beside her and pulls out a piece of fabric, a torn bit of sleeve, soft and pale, stitched at the edge with an almost invisible thread in the shape of a spiral. She dips it in a bowl of river water, then wrings it out gently. "In some parts of the valley," she says as she hands it to you, "a girl would give her sleeve to someone as a promise. If it was accepted, it was sewn into his tunic. If not, it was washed here and sent back to the river. You take the damp fabric in your palm. It's surprisingly warm, even after the water. She nods. This one's for release. Dip it again when you're ready. You crouch beside the stream. The water moves steadily, not fast, not slow, just certain. You press the sleeve into it, watching as the fibers darken and loosen slightly. It floats for a moment before sinking into your palm again, calmer somehow. You lay it gently on a nearby stone to dry. No declarations, no symbols, just a moment to name something to yourself and let it rest. Not far from the wash house, past a row of willow trees, you hear singing, not performance, not for applause, but for rhythm. You follow the sound and find a group of weavers seated on low stools beneath a pergola made of intertwined branches and old iron hooks. Each person has a loom in front of them, and the tapestries they're weaving are strange, beautiful things, not symmetrical, not tidy, but full of texture and little surprises. A feather woven into a corner, a broken button secured with red thread, a patch of velvet stitched beside sackcloth. One woman looks up and gestures to a nearby stool. You can add something if you like. There's no wrong place to start. You sit down, fingers resting on the edge of the frame. She hands you a piece of thread, golden, soft, and slightly frayed. This is from someone who didn't know how to apologize, she says gently. It's yours now, if you want it. You take it. You don't ask where to weave it. You just begin. Your fingers find a space between two tight rows and slip the thread through, knotting it carefully before tucking it into place. That's all. That's enough. These are the apology weavings. You learn tapestries made entirely from donated fragments. Each scrap carries a story, but no one asks you to tell it. Some were given in love, others in guilt. Some were left behind by accident. The weavers simply take what's offered and turn it into something that lives. You help for a while, quiet, until the woman beside you begins humming a tune. Others join in, some on pitch, some not. It doesn't matter. It holds the same shape of honesty either way. Eventually, the singing fades, and you stand, bowing your thanks. The woman offers you a folded square of woven fabric, no larger than your palm. Keep it, she says. It's made of almosts. You tuck it carefully into your pocket beside the red thread and the morning scroll. As you continue walking, the sun breaks fully through the clouds, casting golden light across the rooftops and turning puddles into shimmering coins. You pass a garden where a man is planting seeds with a child who insists on placing each one upside down. He lets her, laughs when she says they'll grow better that way. Maybe they will, he says. Maybe they'll surprise us. You make your way toward the bell tower again, where a small group has gathered for the midday chime. But instead of ringing, the bell remains still. A young boy climbs the steps slowly, cradling something in his arms, a small basket filled with feathers. He reaches the top, then begins dropping them one by one. They float down in silence, some white, some gray, some streaked with brown. As they drift, a hush falls over the crowd. A woman beside you whispers, "For every time we didn't speak, for every time we should have." No one moves to catch them. They land where they choose. One feather brushes your sleeve before falling to the ground. You pick it up and turn it over in your palm. Light as breath, fragile as choice. You carry it with you as you return toward the heart of the village, where the marketplace has opened again. But today it hums with a quieter energy. People exchange not just goods, but gentle questions. How are you really? Did you sleep well? Did you remember to forgive yourself this morning? You stop at a table where a man carves words into thin pieces of driftwood. Each word is chosen by someone passing by. You ask for one without speaking it aloud. He studies you for a moment, then carves a single word, still. He places it in your hand like an offering. You don't need to explain what it means to you. Here, people seem to understand that language doesn't always live in sentences. Sometimes it lives in feathers and fragments, in folded notes, in water-soaked sleeves. As you make your way back toward the square, the post still stands, swaying ever so slightly in the breeze, and you feel, without quite knowing why, that something inside you has found its way back to balance. You sit once more on the stone bench near the fountain, pull the woven square from your pocket, and press it gently against your chest, not as a shield, but as a memory of everything that can still be mended. The fountain gurgles softly beside you, its sound as steady as breath. You sit there for a while, unmoving, watching ripples form and break, letting your thoughts rise and fall in time with them. The square is quieter now, not empty, just settled. A few villagers stroll past, nodding to one another without words, as if their conversations have long since moved beyond speech. You turn the small square of weaving over in your hands again. Its texture is uneven, a patchwork of softness and stiffness, of threads that have clearly come from many lives. There's something grounding about the way it feels, not polished, not perfect, but fully there, like someone reaching out without needing to hold on. Eventually, you rise, drawn once more toward the path that curls behind the ribbon post and dips into the lower part of the village. You haven't explored this direction yet. You walk without expectation, following the slope as it weaves through gardens and small sheds, past a stone oven releasing its final wisps of warmth into the morning air. At the very bottom, where the road becomes little more than a dirt trail lined with mossy stones, you find a gate. It's low and crooked, made of wood bleached pale by sun and rain. There's no lock, only a sign etched in faint script. The Garden of Second Chances. Leave what didn't bloom. Take what still might. You step through the gate, inside. The garden stretches wide and wild, but not unkempt. Vines crawl up lattices made from old wagon wheels. Herbs grow in mismatched crates and pottery shards. Rows of vegetables lean imperfectly, a little overgrown, a little unruly, and everywhere are forgotten things, quietly repurposed. An old mirror, cracked at the edges, sits propped beside a rose bush, reflecting sunlight through spider webs. A pair of boots has been turned into planters for mint and sage. Broken teacups cradle seedlings. Half-burned candles stand in a bed of moss, their wax melted into puddles now home to tiny flowers. A woman walks past you with a watering can and a kind smile. She doesn't ask who you are. She just points to a wooden bench shaded by a pear tree and says, "If you brought something, you can plant it there." You take a seat, feeling the weight of her words settle in slowly. You reach into your pocket and run your fingers over the carved piece of driftwood. Still. You think about all the meanings it's gathered since it touched your hand. Stillness, still here, still becoming. Near the bench is a small box filled with slips of paper, each one blank. A piece of charcoal rests beside it. You pick up a page and pause. Then, without overthinking it, you write, "For what I tried to love but didn't know how to hold." You fold the paper once, then again. There's a small garden trowel nearby, and you use it to dig a shallow spot in the soil beneath the pear tree. You place the folded paper gently inside, then cover it with earth, smoothing it over with your palm. You don't expect anything to grow, but you understand now, that's not the point. The garden isn't here to give back. It's here to receive, to hold what no longer fits, what no longer needs fixing, only resting. You sit for a while, letting the silence bloom around you. Eventually, you wander deeper into the garden. You pass small signs tucked into the dirt near various plants. Regret turned into lavender. Used to be bitterness, now basil, Not a failure, just a tomato with bad timing. You laugh softly at that last one, past the compost bins and the drying herbs. You find a low stone wall that marks the garden's end. Beyond it lies open meadow, dappled with wildflowers and bees that move without urgency. You sit on the wall, watching the petals sway in the wind. Someone else joins you, a man with dirt-streaked hands and a shirt that's more patch than cloth. He doesn't speak for a long time. Then he says, "You're not the first to come here with something quiet in your chest." You nod. He looks out across the field and adds, "It's not about leaving things behind. It's about letting them rest in peace." You think of the ribbon post, of the straw dolls in the forest, of the looms and the feathers and the clock of mended hours. So many places in this village dedicated to one thing, giving what you feel a home, even if no one else ever sees it. When you finally stand to leave, the man offers you a seed, small, round, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. "Plant it if you stay, carry it if you go," he says. Either way, it knows what to do. You thank him and make your way back through the garden, past the bench, past the tree, past the paper you buried, still thinking about everything that's allowed to grow only after you stop forcing it to. As you return to the heart of the village, the sky has shifted, pale blue deepening, the sun sliding toward afternoon. The square is busier now, not loud, not hurried, just full of people returning to the gentle business of life. You pause near the fountain once more, dropping the tiny seed into your pocket alongside the red thread, the woven cloth, the word carved into wood. Each item small, each one quiet, each one yours. You notice something new. A child drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Circles, spirals, lines that loop but never quite close. You watch her for a moment. She looks up, offers a grin missing 2 front teeth, and says, "They're not maps. They're just directions for feelings." You kneel beside her, pick up a second stick, and begin drawing too. The dirt is cool beneath your fingers, slightly damp, as you draw slow, looping lines next to the child. She watches with quiet approval, then leans forward and adds her own, a spiral within your circle, like a whispered reply. You both work in silence, your sticks moving not with purpose, but with patience. No one asks what it's supposed to be. That's not the point. Eventually, she drops her stick and sits back with a sigh. "That one means almost," she says, pointing at her spiral. Then she points at yours. "That one feels like anyway." You nod. It makes perfect sense. When she runs off toward a woman waving from the bakery window, you stay for just a few more minutes. The sun has warmed the earth beneath your knees, and the lines you've drawn have no beginning or end, only motion. You smooth the surface gently with your palm before you rise, not to erase it, but to tuck it back into the earth like a secret return to the soil. As you make your way toward the edge of the village, you pass the ribbon post again. Another new ribbon flutters there, a yellow one this time, tied in a small, careful bow. You don't need to read the note attached to understand what it holds. Every ribbon speaks its own language, visible only to the one who tied it. You walk beyond the square now, toward the outer paths where trees lean low over the road, and the stone fences give way to meadows once again. You think about how strange it is that a place could feel both unfamiliar and deeply known. Not because you've seen it before, but because something inside you has seen what it means. Ahead, you spot a figure bent over a table near an old wooden cart. He's sanding small pieces of driftwood, each shaped like a feather, a wave, or a flame. As you approach, he lifts his head and smiles. "Almost missed you," he says, "though you're certain you've never met." He gestures to the feathers on the table. People leave behind their heaviness here, turn it into something that floats. You look over the pieces. Each is simple, smooth by hand, with words carved into their curves. I tried, not yet, enough. Some have names, others just shapes. One has a line that wraps all the way around its edge. Forgiveness is never late. You ask if you may leave a word. He hands you a feather, soft ash wood, still slightly warm from the sun. No rush, he says. It doesn't have to be clever, it just has to be true. You think for a moment, then use the small carving tool to press in 5 letters. Stay. He takes the feather gently from you and nods. We'll place it near the orchard. It'll catch the wind there. You thank him, but he waves it off. It's not thanks I need, he says, just the trust to let go. You continue walking, your feet finding the curve of the path, as if you've walked it 100 times before. At the base of a hill, you spot a gate made of twine and dried vines. A sign reads, "The Archive of Almosts." Curious, you step through. The space beyond is not large, more a grove than a building. Trees circle the area, their trunks strung with long ribbons of parchment. Each ribbon carries writing, not stories, exactly, but fragments, phrases, questions, moments caught mid-thought. You read a few as you pass. I meant to tell you before I left. She smiled, but I couldn't hold it. Maybe if we'd met a week later. I was afraid, so I stayed quiet. They sway gently in the wind, brushing each other like leaves. None are signed, none are dated. They simply exist. A murmuring forest of everything people never got to say. A woman seated beneath one of the trees offers you a ribbon and a brush. You take them with care. Your ink is pale blue. Your hand shakes just a little as you write, "I loved you, even when I didn't understand you." You tie the ribbon to the nearest branch, and for a moment, it hangs still, then joins the others in their quiet chorus. There's no ceremony, no spotlight, just the feeling that you've added one thread to something much larger than yourself. When you leave the grove, your steps feel lighter. You don't know if it's because of what you let go or because of what you allowed yourself to carry forward. The path ahead leads you past a low stone cottage with a wide porch. A man sits there mending a net, the kind used for fishing or gathering fruit from tall branches. He nods as you pass. Heading toward the listening hill, he asks. You pause, unsure. He nods toward the rise in the distance. Good place to end the day. You smile and thank him. The hill isn't steep, but it curves just enough to make the walk feel earned. You reach the top as the sun begins to slide toward the western trees, casting long shadows across the golden grass. There's a wide, flat stone at the summit, and you sit down on its warm surface, letting the quiet wrap around you like a shawl. From here, the village is just barely visible, roofs like scattered thoughts, smoke rising in gentle spirals, a bell tower catching the last edge of sunlight. You listen, not just to bird song or breeze, but to something deeper, the sound beneath the world, the hum of things unspoken but known. Somewhere below, someone is tying another ribbon. Someone is writing a letter they may never send. Someone is folding bread dough and thinking of a name they once whispered into the dark. You let it all move through you. Historians still argue whether these places ever existed, whether there truly were gardens where people buried what hurt, or clocks that gave back what time took away. But up here, on this hill, you know the truth doesn't need proof. The truth lives in the softness of the ground, the warmth of the stone, the weight of your own breath as you finally let it come all the way in and all the way out. You sit on the listening hill long after the sun slips below the tree line, watching the shadows stretch and soften until everything around you is touched by twilight. The air has changed, cooler now, laced with the scent of distant hearths and late-blooming flowers. Down in the village, lamps flicker to life, one by one, like stars accepting their place in the evening sky. There's no urgency to leave. The stone beneath you still holds the warmth of the day, and your body, for once, doesn't feel like it's waiting for the next thing. You're not hungry, you're not restless, you're simply here, and being here is enough. Eventually, when the darkness thickens and the first true night, sounds begin. The chirp of crickets, the low hoot of something winged. You rise. Your legs protest just a little, but in that kind, aching way that reminds you they have carried you far. As you descend the hill, the path glows faintly with lanterns placed at uneven intervals, leading you gently back toward the heart of the village. Halfway down, you pass a low stone bench with a small wooden box perched on its edge. The box is open, and inside are folded pieces of paper, each one tied with a bit of thread. A sign beside it reads, "Whispers for later, take one, only if you're ready." You pause, not because you doubt, but because you want to be sure. Then, slowly, you reach in and select a paper with a knot of soft gray twine. You don't open it, not yet. You tuck it into your cloak pocket, where it joins the other things you've gathered. The red thread, the feather, the word carved into wood, the square of weaving, the seed still wrapped in cloth. A quiet collection of invisible things. At the base of the hill, you pass a pair of women stringing lanterns between two trees. One hums as she works. The other stands back to observe the light. Neither speaks. You wonder how many evenings they've done this, whether they know that what they're hanging isn't just lanterns, but permission for stillness, for stories, for something unnamed. You return to the village square just as the lamps reach their full glow. People gather loosely, not in lines or rows, but in natural shapes, clusters of friends, pairs of strangers, individuals with eyes tilted toward the night sky. In the center, a circle of musicians begins to tune their instruments, not loudly, but in a tone that suggests invitation rather than performance. A bell chimes once, not the tower bell, but a smaller one, held by a girl in a dress hemmed with dried flowers. She lifts it only once, and the crowd stills. Tonight is the ceremony of misremembering. You heard whispers of it earlier. Something about stories told not exactly as they happened, but as they were felt. A chance to honor the truth of emotion over the facts of memory. Not lying, just softening. A man steps forward to begin. He's old, bent slightly at the shoulders, with a voice like bark worn smooth by rain. "When I met her," he says, "she wore a green dress. Or maybe it was blue, but I remember it swayed like it knew secrets." The crowd hums with small, fond laughter. Another woman takes her turn. "He never said he loved me," she begins, "but he brought me tea every morning, and once, when I was sick, he tied my shoes. I think that counts." You listen as one person after another steps into the circle to offer not stories, exactly, but moments, fractured, fuzzy, sweet. Each one held not by precision, but by affection. No one corrects anyone. No one asks for proof. Historians would argue with all of this. But you realize, sitting there with your folded paper still unopened in your pocket, that history, the kind that lives inside hearts, was never meant to be recited perfectly. It was meant to be felt. After the last story fades into the firelight, the musicians begin to play, slowly, quietly, the kind of tune you don't dance to so much as lean into. Some people rise and move, others sit and sway. You remain seated, hand resting over your chest, breathing in time with the rhythm. And then, only then, do you reach for the folded paper. You untie the gray twine, careful not to tear the creases, and open it with both hands. Inside is a single sentence, written in a steady hand. "You did the best you could. That was always enough." You close your eyes, not because you're tired, but because that sentence, that single line, settles somewhere deeper than thought. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't erase the past, but it cradles something you didn't know was still afraid. You fold the paper again and hold it tightly for a few breaths before slipping it back into your cloak. Around you, the village moves like a tide, not crashing or pulling, just shifting in gentle waves. People come and go, some laugh softly, some cry, some, like you, simply sit and let the night happen around them. Eventually, the music slows to a stop, not a grand finish, just a final note that knows when to leave. The crowd begins to disperse, with no announcement, no signal, only that shared understanding. The moment has passed, and it's time to rest. You walk back to the cottage slowly, your steps lighter than when you first arrived. The door creaks in its familiar way as you enter, and the fire in the hearth is already burning low. Someone must have lit it for you, thinking ahead, as people here tend to do. You remove your shoes, place your keepsakes gently on the small wooden table, and lie down. Outside, the crickets have begun their evening chorus. The breeze hums softly through the shutters. You pull the blanket up to your chest and close your eyes, and for the first time in longer than you can remember, you do not feel unfinished. You feel accompanied. Morning arrives like an old friend easing into the room. Not loud, not bright, just present. The fire in the hearth has gone to ash, and the cottage smells faintly of wood smoke and lavender. You blink slowly, letting your senses stretch awake before you move. There's no urgency here, no clang of alarm, no list of tasks pressing against your forehead. You sit up and notice a small cloth bundle left on the table, tied with a green thread. You untie it gently. Inside is a piece of bread, still warm, and a small jar of honey. Tucked beneath them is a note on soft, creased paper. For wherever you go next, something to remind you how you were held here. You close the note and hold it to your chest for a moment, letting the words settle the way warm tea settles into your hands on a cold morning. You eat slowly, savoring every bite, every grain of sweetness. The world outside the window glows golden and pale, like it's just remembering how to be day again. After dressing, you tuck your collected tokens into the small cloth pouch by your side. The red thread, the carved feather, the seed, the ribboned scroll, the piece of weaving, and now this note, each one light enough to carry, heavy enough to matter. Outside, the village feels half awake, doors creaking open, someone sweeping a stoop, a rooster calling once and then thinking better of it. You wander down the familiar path toward the square, past the ribbon post, where more ribbons flutter today than ever before. You pause for a moment, not to read them, but simply to listen. It sounds like paper learning how to speak wind. At the edge of the square, an older man you haven't met is setting up a long table covered in smooth river stones. He smiles when he sees you. "Today's the day of stones," he says. "Every stone, a decision." He gestures to the table. "Take one, if you're near a choice." You scan the surface. Each stone has a word etched into it, some deep, some shallow. Some polished to gleaming, others left matte and raw. Stay, leave, ask, forgive, begin again. Keep going. You pick up a stone that feels familiar before you even see the word. It's cool in your palm, smooth as breath, and etched with a single word: trust. The man nods as if you've answered a question without him needing to ask it. "You don't have to act on it today," he says, wrapping the stone in a scrap of cloth and handing it back. "Just carry it. See where it takes you." You walk with the wrapped stone in your hand, its weight anchoring you not to a burden, but to an openness you didn't realize had grown in you. You spend the morning weaving through parts of the village you hadn't yet explored. A grove where people write anonymous blessings on birch bark and hang them from tree limbs. A low cellar where laughter echoes from a game of stones and spoons. A candle workshop where someone hums while carving messages into the wax before dipping the wicks. You pass a window and see someone sitting alone, embroidering a napkin with a phrase that appears to say, "I stayed longer than I planned. Thank you for not asking why." You don't knock, you just keep walking, understanding completely. Later, near the wash house, you notice a group gathered around an old wooden frame. It looks like a mirror at first, but there's no glass, only thin, vertical strands of string. Each person approaches the frame and hums a single note. The strings vibrate faintly, carrying the sound. A girl nearby explains, "It's for those who still need to say something, but don't know how to say it." She adds with a shrug, "Sometimes humming works better than words." You hum a note, low, steady, and the strings ripple like a quiet yes. In the afternoon, you return to the hill, this time from a different path. The wind moves differently today, more curious than yesterday. You sit in the same spot on the same stone and pull out the seed from your pouch. You turn it in your fingers. It hasn't changed, still wrapped in cloth, still full of whatever it is becoming. At the base of the hill, you spot a garden plot freshly turned. A hand-lettered sign reads, "For new things," even if you're not sure they're ready. You descend slowly, kneel in the dirt, and press the seed gently into the soil. You don't name it, you don't label it. You simply plant it and whisper, "Grow however you need." Then you cover it with earth and walk away. That evening, as twilight brushes over the rooftops again, the villagers gather in the square for one final ritual. This time, there's no sign announcing it, no bell, just the way people begin to drift toward the fire pit in the center, each carrying a candle. You're given one too, unlit, cool and slender in your hand. A woman steps forward and begins lighting hers from a small flame kept in a bowl. Then she turns to the next person, and so it spreads, candle to candle, hand to hand. When the flame reaches you, you light your wick and pass it along. No words, no instruction, just glow. Once everyone's candle is lit, the villagers begin walking, not in a line, but in a wide, shifting spiral that moves slowly outward from the square. They hum a tune too soft to name, a kind of collective exhale. You walk with them. The spiral carries you past everything you've come to know. The ribbon post, the loom house, the listening bench, the garden of second chances, and eventually, it leads you to the edge of the village, where a narrow bridge arches over a quiet stream. Here, the spiral slows, and people begin to stop, one by one, placing their candles at the base of the bridge. Some kneel, some close their eyes, some simply watch the flame flicker out on its own. You place yours gently, letting it burn for just a moment longer before blowing it out with one slow breath. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like an honoring. You turn back toward the village, the stone of trust in your pocket, the red thread still wrapped, the whisper still folded. Everything you've gathered, everything you've planted, everything you've chosen not to say, all of it part of a story that doesn't need to resolve, only to continue. And as the sky shifts into stars, you realize nothing here ever asked to be perfect. It only asked you to show up. You walk back through the village under a sky gently freckled with stars. No street lamps, no glaring lights, only lanterns in windows and the soft shimmer of starlight bouncing off rooftops. The quiet around you is full, not empty. Every footstep, every creak of a gate, every breath you take feels like it belongs. At the corner near the fountain, someone has left a basket labeled "For the Road." Inside, small flasks of tea, folded scarves, half loaves of bread wrapped in cloth, and notes tied to bits of lavender. You take one flask and one note, The kind of selection that feels like instinct more than choice. You don't read the note right away. You want to wait. Back at the cottage, the fire has been relit, not by you, but clearly for you. The door creaked open when you touched it, like it knew you were coming. You sit at the little wooden table, the candlelight flickering gently over the pouch of tokens in front of you. Each item you've collected hums with its own quiet frequency, and somehow they all feel like they've been waiting to meet each other. You lay them out, one by one, in no particular order. The red thread, the carved feather, the ribboned scroll, the word on driftwood, the square of weaving, the still-wrapped seed, the folded whisper, and now, the note from the basket. You untie the string and unfold it. The paper is soft, slightly smudged. The handwriting curves gently. Some journeys are circles, others are spirals. You'll know which by the way you feel when you return. You read it twice, then fold it back and hold it against your chest. Outside the window, you can just see the edge of the hill where you planted your seed. The wind has changed direction, not stronger, not colder, just different. You take that as a sign. Later that night, you don't sleep right away. You lie in bed, watching the shadows of branches dance on the wall. The movement is hypnotic, a quiet theater of leaves and lantern light. Your body is tired, but your mind feels like it's humming gently just beneath the surface, not restless, just alert to something tender. And then, soft as breath, you hear it. A bell, one chime, then two, then three. You rise and follow the sound out into the dark, clutching your cloak at the neck. The chimes are different from those of the clock of mended hours, different from the watcher's bell. These sound older, lower, deeper. You follow the sound down a path you hadn't noticed before, one lined with carved stones half buried in moss, each marked with symbols instead of words. The trees here arch inward, like a cathedral with no roof. The stars blink through the leaves above like shy witnesses. At the end of the path, you find a circle of people, each seated before a bowl filled with water. No fire, no torches, just the moonlight and the shimmer of reflection. A woman gestures for you to join. You sit, she places a bowl in front of you and says only, "This is where we name the things we're not ready to let go." You stare at the water. It's perfectly still. Around you, no one speaks aloud, but every so often, someone dips a fingertip into the bowl and lets the ripple move outward. You watch those ripples, how gently they spread, how far they travel. You do not know what to name, but something inside you does. You dip your finger into the bowl and whisper silently into the space between breaths. What if it could have been different? What if I never say it right? What if I leave before I'm finished? The water ripples. The bowl remains. You are not required to make peace with it. You are only asked to admit that it lives inside you, and that, somehow, is enough. After a time, the group rises. One by one, each person pours their bowl of water at the roots of the oldest tree in the clearing. You follow suit, watching the water vanish into the soil, carrying your unnamed ache with it. You return to the village with bare feet and a quiet that isn't silence, but stillness. Before you sleep, you place each of your keepsakes back into the pouch, except for one, the carved driftwood with the word trust. You set it beside your bed like a sentinel, a promise to yourself. When morning comes again, the sky is soft with mist. You rise, dress, and step outside to find a basket at your door. Inside is a folded map. It isn't a map of roads or rivers or places. It's a map of rituals, inked symbols for every spot you visited, a looped thread for the weaver's circle, a spiral for the garden, a small bell for the watcher's post, and one tiny hand-drawn hill, labeled not with words, but with a star. Beneath the map, a line is written in familiar ink. There's one last path. If you choose to take it, you do. The path begins behind the well, winding past the farthest cottage and into a stretch of land where the grass grows in silvery tufts. There's no clear destination, but the map leads you. You pass stones wrapped in thread, flowers blooming beside old boots, and ribbons tied to branches in high places, left there by someone who must have climbed for the sake of saying yes. This matters. Finally, you reach a small wooden arch. No gate, no lock. Just a beam of wood carved with one final phrase. This is where we begin again, but softer. You step through. And in that moment, the wind rises behind you, not to push you forward, but to remind you that wherever you go next, you are bringing something with you. Not answers, not clarity, not certainty, but the memory of being gently seen and the courage to love what unfolds. The arch behind you grows smaller with each step you take, though you never hear it close. It remains there, quiet and waiting, as if it knows some will return, and others will only carry its shape in memory. The path beyond it is unfamiliar, not wild, but unmarked, like a book that hasn't been read yet. The air here is gentler somehow, touched by that same hush you felt on the hilltop and in the circle of water bowls. You notice more now, the curve of dew on a leaf, the quiet rhythm of a breeze threading through tall grasses, the way your footsteps barely make a sound. It's not that the world has changed. You have. Your listening has deepened. After a while, the path turns and brings you to a clearing. In its center stands a single tree, tall, wide, with bark textured like folded fabric and roots that rise above the earth in slow-motion spirals. At its base sits a bench, carved from one of its own fallen branches. You take a seat, no one speaks, no one appears, but the tree feels alive in a way that doesn't demand your attention. It simply allows it. You take a deep breath, and for the first time, you feel it fully reach your belly before it flows back out. You realize just how long it's been since you let yourself breathe like this, unguarded, unmeasured, just enough. Then, from beneath the bench, you spot something resting in the grass, a small wooden box, nearly hidden in the shadow of the roots. When you open it, you find slips of parchment, one for every visitor, you imagine, each holding a question instead of a quote. You choose one at random. The ink is faded, but still legible. What part of you is still waiting for permission to be soft? You sit with it. You don't answer. You don't need to. The question is a companion, not a demand. You place the slip back into the box and gently return it beneath the bench. In the branches above, a small bird begins to sing. It's not a song you recognize, but its tone is clear and warm, like a voice humming for its own comfort rather than for an audience. You watch the bird tilt its head, feathers ruffling as if it's just woken from a pleasant nap. It flits away a moment later, and you feel oddly reassured by its indifference. The world continues, whether or not you know where you're going. When you finally rise, you notice a narrow trail leading beyond the clearing. You follow it without needing to decide. The path leads downward, through a soft hollow where mist hugs the ground and trees lean closer to one another as if whispering. At the bottom, you find the stream again, the one where the candle bridge ended the night before. But this time, the stream is wide enough to wade across, and a wooden sign beside it reads, "To return is not to retreat." You slip off your shoes, step into the water, and let the cold wrap around your ankles like a greeting. The stones beneath your feet are smooth and kind. You walk slowly, savoring the way each step feels like rinsing. Halfway through, you pause. The water is clear here, and you can see your reflection. Not perfect, not still, but real. A little rippled, a little blurred, and yet unmistakably you. You kneel in the shallows and press your palms to the surface. It doesn't give, but it holds you. You whisper into the water, not words this time, but a kind of thank you shaped only in breath. And the water listens. On the far bank, the trail leads uphill once again, toward a ridge where the trees open up to a vast expanse of sky. The light is changing now. Late afternoon, brushing everything in amber. You climb without hurry, feet bare, hands swinging at your sides, your pouch of tokens bouncing gently at your hip like a heartbeat. At the top of the ridge, you find a weathered post with signs pointing in every direction. Some have names you recognize: the Hill of Listening, the Clock of Mended Hours. Others are unfamiliar: the Orchard of Lost Names, the Library Without Locks. You could go anywhere, but instead of choosing, you sit, because for the first time, there's no pull, no need to reach or strive or even wonder. The wind moves across your face like a lullaby. The signs creak lightly in the breeze, and your thoughts, usually tangled and crowded, have stretched out into something slow and simple. You unpack your pouch again, one by one. You lay out your treasures: the red thread, the feather, the word carved in driftwood, the seed still unplanted in your heart, the note that said trust, the ribbon of almost, the silent whisper you wrote but never read aloud. Each one has changed, though none of them look different. The change is in you, in how you hold them, in how you remember receiving them. And then, for the very first time, you realize none of this was meant to fix you. It was meant to remind you that softness is not the opposite of strength, that pausing is not the same as giving up, that you are allowed, even in the rush of the world, to carry peace like a pocket stone, small, warm, unnoticed, but always there. You smile, not because you've reached the end, but because there is no end. Only this moment, this breath, this place where the past has loosened its grip, and the future doesn't yet demand shape. You stand, you do not look back. Because now, the path ahead isn't a question, it's an invitation. And so, with soft footsteps and an even softer heart, you walk forward, not toward a destination, but into a kind of stillness that moves with you. The sky above has deepened into velvet, scattered with stars that blink like small, thoughtful promises. Each one seems to whisper something just for you. You made it. You were here. You are still becoming. There is no need to hurry now, no rush to understand, no urgency to explain. You've learned that some things only bloom when left unnamed. That quiet can be a kind of language. That the gentlest truths are often the ones that wait patiently in the margins. Your body relaxes with every step. Your shoulders loosen. Your breath settles. And in that soft undoing, something within you begins to rest. Not just your limbs, but your worries, your old thoughts, your should-haves and what-ifs. They are no longer needed here. Ahead, you see the edge of a new forest, its trees swaying like old friends waving from a distance. But you don't need to go there tonight. You only need to know that it exists, a path you may take tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever your heart feels ready to listen again. For now, you close your eyes. The night cradles you like a lullaby made of earth and breath and memory. And as you drift, the only thing left is peace. Quiet. Steady peace. Good night.